Hello, welcome to the podcast AnonX. Have you ever, felt like there's maybe a bigger human story out there, something older maybe than what we usually hear about in history class? What if there's this huge piece of our past that's not just lost, but maybe kind of hidden, waiting for us to find it again? Today, we're doing a deep dive into Lemuria. It's this place, right? Started as a scientific question, like a puzzle, but then it morphed into this really deep spiritual mystery.
Exactly. We're looking at Lemuria, which, scientists first thought up to explain this weird biological thing. But then, science moved on, and the idea got picked up by mystics, by New Age thinkers, and they completely changed how they saw human origin spiritual stuff. It's a really fascinating story, actually. Science looking for answers and people looking for, deeper meaning all tangled together.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of peel back those layers on Lemuria. We'll look at where the idea first came from in science, which is pretty weird in itself, then track how it became this big spiritual thing, this archetype, and finally see how it's still around, in modern culture. Get ready for some surprising facts, maybe a few aha moments about these lost worlds. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is Lemuria, basically?
Okay, so Lemuria, at its core, is this idea of a lost continent, a hypothetical one. The original theory placed it in the Indian Ocean, thought to have sunk beneath the waves.
Right.
And the name itself, Lemuria, that comes directly from the lemur, those primates you mostly find on Madagascar.
Wow. Okay, so a whole continent named after lemurs. How did that even happen? How did scientists in the 1800s come up with something so big?
Right. You got to picture the mid-1800s. Lots of exploring, finding fossils all over. And zoologists hit this puzzle. Lemur fossils were showing up in Madagascar, but also India, Sri Lanka. But they weren't finding them in mainland Africa or the Middle East, which was weird.
Yeah, that is strange. How did they get from Madagascar to India without crossing Africa? It makes you wonder, how'd they travel?
Exactly. And this was way before anyone understood continental drift. Back then, the idea of land bridges, bits of land rising up and sinking down again, that was actually a pretty common scientific explanation.
Yeah.
So in 1864, this British zoologist, Philip Sclater, he's more a bird guy, actually, an ornithologist, got really interested in these lemurs. He figured the only way to explain Madagascar's unique animals, especially the lemurs, was a sunken landmass that used to connect it to India. And he called it Lemuria, named right after the animal that sparked the whole idea.
So Sclater was just trying to solve an animal distribution puzzle. No ancient people, no lost civilizations at this stage, just biology.
Purely zoology, yeah. Strictly biogeography. But you know how ideas catch on? The thought of a lost continent. That captured people's imaginations. So late 1880s, this German biologist, Ernst Haeckel, he was big into Darwin's ideas. He took Sclater's Lemuria and, ran with it. Haeckel suggested Lemuria might have been the actual birthplace of humans, like proto-humans or ape men lived there, then spread out before it sank.
Okay. And this is where it starts getting a bit more complicated and, frankly, controversial, right?
Oh, definitely. It's really important to know that Haeckel's theories, while they had some influence, were also deeply tangled up in racial pseudoscience. He sort of used Lemuria to prop up some pretty problematic ideas about human races and evolution, which is not great.
Yeah, that's a really unfortunate turn. So, okay, science eventually figures out plate tectonics, continental drift. The need for a sunken Lemuria land bridge kind of evaporates scientifically. Did the whole idea just fade away then?
Not even close. Actually, this is where it gets really interesting. It leaves the science labs and walks right into the world of, occult philosophy. Madame Helena Blavatsky, she was this really influential Russian mystic, co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. She's key here. Her big work, The Secret Doctrine, came out in 1888. Huge impact on Western esoteric thought. And she totally reimagined Lemuria. It wasn't just a land bridge anymore. It was a mystical homeland. She introduced her idea of root races, stages of spiritual evolution, and said the Lemurians were the third root race.
Root races.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this theosophical view, who are the Lemurians? What were they supposed to be like?
Well, according to Blavatsky and theosophy, they were pretty wild. Initially, like ethereal beings, almost non-physical, and hermaphroditic. But as humanity evolved, they became more solid, more physical, and huge. Some texts say they were like 15 feet tall, and they had these incredible psychic powers. Telepathy was supposedly their main way of communicating, no spoken words needed, just mind to mind. They were also deeply connected to the earth, supposedly able to manipulate elements like weather or plants just with their minds, not with tools.
Wow. So not using tech like us, but manipulating energy directly, living sort of in tune with the planet.
Exactly. Their whole existence was described as really harmonious, nonviolent, peaceful. They apparently had a spiritual diet, plant-based, maybe even absorbing energy directly from the ether. You know, that universal energy field in esoteric thought. Some later esoteric ideas even brought in off-world connections, suggesting Lemuria was maybe seeded by beings from places like the Pleiades or Sirius.
That's a million miles from Sclater's lemur fossils. Okay, so if they didn't have physical technology, what was their civilization like? You mentioned cities.
Right, their tech was psychic spiritual mastery. Their cities weren't like ours. They're described as these enormous, maybe crystal-based structures, radiating spiritual energy, built with nature, not dominating it. Society was all about cooperation, peace, balance. Spiritual learning, communal rituals were supposedly central. Some accounts even talk about like wide, smooth roads, a population maybe around 64 million. They supposedly had an emperor, Ramu, and worshipped a supreme being, often symbolized by a lotus or the sun.
Sounds like a paradise, honestly, a real utopia. So
Yeah.
what went wrong? How did it supposedly fall?
Well, Blavatsky and later theosophists didn't just blame geology, like earthquakes or volcanoes, though those were part of it. The main reason, in their view, was spiritual. The Lemurians started to lose their way, got caught up in more material things, maybe lost their psychic connection. So the fall of Lemuria is often framed as this big cosmic warning, about what happens when a civilization prioritizes the material over the spiritual, like the earth itself reacted to their decline.
So the land reflected their inner state. That's a powerful metaphor. Did any of them survive this collapse?
The story goes that yes, some did survive. They migrated out. And some of those survivors, according to the theory, eventually became the Atlanteans, which naturally brings us to that other famous lost continent.
Atlantis, right. Lemuria and Atlantis. In these esoteric circles, they're often mentioned together like two sides of a coin. How do they relate? What's the difference?
Yeah, they're definitely linked. Lemuria usually comes first in the timeline third root race, remember?
Right.
Atlantis is typically the fourth. Philosophically, they're often contrasted. Lemuria is the spiritual utopia, focused inward on harmony, psychic stuff. Atlantis is more the technologically advanced society, powerful, maybe more focused on the material world, which ultimately led to its own downfall through pride or misuse of power. There are even some versions where they existed at the same time and maybe even fought a war, which helped destroy both of them.
It's amazing how these stories often pinpoint actual places on Earth today as being connected, like remnants or safe havens. Where do people think Lemurian influence still exists?
Well, a really big one in New Age circles is Mount Shasta, up in Northern California. The belief there is that Lemurian survivors created vast cities inside the mountain, a place called Telos. And the inhabitants are often described as these tall, radiant beings still safeguarding ancient wisdom, maybe waiting for us surface dwellers to, raise our vibration before they reappear.
Mount Shasta, interesting. Are there other spots around the world linked to Lemuria?
Oh, yeah. There's a strong connection made, particularly in Tamil culture, to Kumari Kandam. That's a legendary sunken land in the Indian Ocean, seen as the cradle of Tamil civilization. Also, lots of Pacific islands, Easter Island, Hawaii, Fiji, places like that, are sometimes thought to be mountain peaks of the lost continent. Often it's called Min in that context, a name popularized by James Churchward. But Mu and Lemuria get kind of mixed together in these ideas. People look at ancient statues or symbols on these islands as possible evidence.
So beyond the spiritual communities and maybe some fringe archaeology, how has Lemuria seeped into regular modern culture?
It pops up more than you might think. It's definitely in fantasy books. Lynn Carter wrote a whole series about Fongor, set in Lemuria. H.P. Lovecraft used it. Even Thomas Pynchon. You see references in movies, comics, TV shows too, like Doctor Who's mentioned it, Stargate. It often represents some kind of lost golden age, hidden knowledge, ancient secrets. And yeah, it's still huge in New Age spirituality, sometimes gets linked with UFOs too. It just has this enduring mystique.
But okay, let's circle back to the science for a moment. What's the final verdict from mainstream geology today? Does Lemuria actually exist?
Well, the scientific consensus is pretty solid on this. That original land bridge idea Sclater had, it was completely replaced by the theory of plate tectonics and continental drift. By the 1960s, thanks to people like Alfred Wegener, plate tectonics became the accepted model. It explains how continents move. So Madagascar and India were connected once. Yeah, it's part of the supercontinent Gondwana. But they drifted apart over millions of years. The lemurs just went along for the ride on their respective landmasses. No need for a huge continent sinking in between. Now, scientists have found sunken bits of continental crust, microcontinents like Mauritia under the Indian Ocean. So there is ancient land down there. but it's not the vast continent of the myth, and it doesn't really fit the Lemuria story.
So geologically, it's a no-go. Yet the belief is still incredibly strong for a lot of people. Why? Why do people still believe in Lemuria, even with the science saying otherwise? What's the pull?
That is the big question, isn't it? And I think it's complex. Even though science debunked the original basis, Lemuria resonates really deeply. For many, it acts like a symbol of maybe deeper human yearning for connection, for wisdom we've lost, for origins that are more mysterious or grand than just, evolution as we understand it. It represents this kind of aspirational ideal, doesn't it? World of peace, harmony, spiritual power, connection with nature. Maybe it challenges the parts of our modern world that feel disconnected or materialistic. For some, it feels like tapping into a kind of soul memory, or maybe just offers a more appealing story than the standard scientific one. It's the allure of the unknown, of hidden history. It speaks to that human need for meaning, for purpose, for connection to something vast. So yeah, our trip through Lemuria really shows how an idea can evolve. Started as a scientific attempt to solve a puzzle, became this incredibly rich spiritual narrative, and it still holds this power today, this symbol of lost wisdom, maybe lost potential, that keeps drawing people in.
And maybe for you listening, the takeaway isn't just about whether a continent literally existed or not. Maybe the story of Lemuria is more about reflecting on a lost state of being human. Whether it's history or myth, it kind of holds up this picture, this blueprint of a different way to live focused on cooperation, inner growth, connection to the planet. So here's a thought to leave you with. What if the power of the Lemuria story isn't about digging up the past, but about recognizing its echo within us? Could remembering or even just imagining that kind of harmony guide us toward creating a better present right here, right now? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.